It is exactly 8:15 news and views on Salam Media, and I'm very pleased to say that our first guest, Bokang Vumbukani Lepolesa, has finally managed to connect up with us. She's the Chief Director responsible for National Accounts at Statistics South Africa. Very good morning to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Julie, and I appreciate it. And good morning to you and the viewers.
Okay,
I appreciate this.
you're smiling very broadly, and of course, I'm kind of wondering what exactly. When I saw the figures, the GDP figures, the growth in the GDP figures this morning, I thought to myself, "Goodness me, what are we?" I don't think it's anything to be jumping up and down about because we're talking about 0.4%. What does that mean? And should we be excited at all? I mean, really 0.4%? Let's understand how that equates in terms of putting food on the table, for example.
Perfect. Okay, yes, I'm indeed smiling, and I think we should all celebrate that 0.4%. It is an
Okay.
improvement, and any improvement really in the economy, on the growth of the economy, is worth a celebration. You might recall that we moved from a very low base of, at the time, we had published minus 1.3, but we revised it upward given the data that came through between the last quarter and the yesterday when you published the data. We revised that upwards. You might have seen it yesterday. We revised that upwards to minus 1.1. That was a contraction. So given that we moved slightly upwards, that's really something to celebrate. But again, the magnitude of it is really worrying if you consider what is happening and the sort of expectations for us to get back to where we used to be pre-COVID and so on. So what it really means to us is we need to start thinking about the best ways to increase our production. Not only that, because the economy can have massive production, but if there's no demand for that same production or the produce that is coming forth, then that's also a problem. So we need to ensure that there's at least money in the hands of the households. Government is also able to spend. Exports are enough for us. We are able to export, and everything goes back to normal to allow that demand side to also grow. But at this point in time, it's like, if I can just give an overview, we did see that 0.4%, the main contributors to that were manufacturing and finance, which each contributed about 0.2 of a percentage point. But the fact is, that growth is significant to us, because if you consider, for instance, a sector like manufacturing, which is able to absorb many or the masses of our unemployed and unskilled labor force, that really says a lot. But the issue then becomes, can we sustain this? So that's where then we need everybody else to come together to try to make things happen on the ground. What is comforting about what we saw yesterday is that only 2 of the 10 sectors that we always report on contracted. So we saw that electricity went down by 1%. Agriculture slumped literally by about 12.3%, and that's huge if you think about it, because remember, a lot of our people have got farming activities that they're really dependent on. So if the sector is not doing well, that's really a cause for concern. That being said, it is important to also take note that what is going on, especially with load shedding, in as much as we, as statisticians say, do not measure the implicit impact of load shedding, it is important for us to know that that is also affecting the production, and therefore, literally, things are going to go south if we don't do anything about it. If you look at the sector itself, the electricity sector, which is what we usually use to gauge the performance, or perhaps if you ask questions about load shedding, we always make reference to the utility sector, because we then get to see how electricity is being produced and how it is also being consumed. We saw that that -1 that was reported yesterday was actually an improvement from what we had reported in the last quarter, because if you remember, we had about a minus zero point 0.2 in electricity production in the previous quarter, which has since improved somewhat now to that 1%. That said, that is confirmation enough for us that the country really needs to do something about it, just so that at least business can be able to operate, and then also people can be able to spend. Talking about spending, I think maybe let me just also give insights on the spending side. We saw from yesterday's figures that household expenditure increased, and specifically the increase was in the food and beverages sort of category. What became interesting is that within that category, people were seen to be buying food from restaurants. And again, it's
Ooh.
saying households, yeah, they are really buying their takeaways. Again, it's giving some insights into, the likelihood of that being a result of what load shedding is doing to us. Because if I'm not able to cook, um, I'll just resort to going to a restaurant, despite interest rates going up, everything else becoming expensive. We saw the elevated inflation and everything else. But I mean, if people are to put something on the table and make ends meet, it means that they will usually resort to what is available to them. So yeah, those are some of the dynamics that we have to be cognizant of.
Yeah. So, Bokang, let me come in here regarding people buying takeouts more than normal. That comes at a cost, does it not, as compared to preparing food in your own home? Restaurant and takeaway foods are very costly indeed. What is that? What is that telling us? Because it's I'm kind of thinking we have a very minimal GDP growth figure, and yet on the other hand, we're seeing that people are buying more. They either going to restaurants or going doing takeouts. The other issue that I do want to touch on is the agriculture issue, where the question of food security comes in. Are we having concerns regarding food security issues sometime in the future?
Okay, maybe let me start off with the one of people buying food and they're going to the restaurants. As I indicated earlier, if there are no other options for people to put food on the table to be able to eat and survive, if they are left with just that one option of going to buy food, they will definitely do that, right? So despite the inflation and how the prices that are continuously going up, unfortunately, that is the situation that we find ourselves in. What also becomes important, and I think that's one thing that we picked yesterday, is that the finance sector grew primarily because of the contribution of the financial intermediaries. So if you think about it, it wouldn't make sense that people would just go out there and incur costs, credit in this context, amidst the rising interest rates and all that. But under the circumstances, we are seeing the credit extensions going up, despite things really not being conducive and the environment really not being conducive for us to be taking credit and so on. But we saw that happen. But like I'm saying, if it is that people have to take credit to survive, I think that's exactly what they're going to do. Now, coming back to agriculture, what contributed to the decline, that 12.3% decrease, was primarily the field crops and animal produce. Remember that the sector is highly dependent on the weather conditions, right? So if the weather allows us to produce, if we have sustainable electricity and power that allows us to, or farmers, that allows farmers to proceed with, for instance, their irrigation systems, definitely there isn't anything to be worried about. But at this point in time, yes, we don't have control over the weather, and therefore we hope that it's not going to be as bad. It's not going to impede growth in the agricultural sector. However, what still remains a concern is the ability for us to sustain some of the processes that allow that agriculture activity to be sustainable and to proceed without any hiccups at all. But like I said, some of these processes within the sector really depend on the sustainable power. And if we don't have that, then that's definitely going to be a threat to food security.
Okay, two more very important questions, and then I'll let you go. You spoke about credit, you spoke about the growth in the finance sector. What I'm wondering about is, in this current climate with the high rates of unemployment, giving out credit, is there not going to be a problem regarding these people repaying the debt? Because unemployment seems to be increasing. people could be losing their jobs going forward if the electricity situation doesn't stabilize in the country. So that is something of concern, is it not? Or do the finance houses do very scrupulous credit vetting on the people who wanting loans?
Okay. Under the circumstances, it would be dangerous for financial houses to just issue out credit as and when it's required without necessarily going into details of affordability of who they're providing credit to. So I believe they are still doing that. And there is a possibility also that a lot of people who could still afford credit were not taking it, but now they are feeling the pinch, and the strain is so much that they really have to resort to credit. So, for instance, well, this is not stats that we released, but I'm assuming that it is possible that somebody can just decide to take a second credit if they are not able to to sustain themselves, that they're to be able to survive with just the one credit. And again, if they are able or eligible to that credit, it's something that the banks will not hesitate doing, because then they would see that it is possible that this person can perhaps sustain the second credit. So I don't think banks will just bluntly go out to say, oh, there's a need for credit and therefore let's issue out money. So yeah, that's my view on it.
Okay, finally, you spoke about in this first quarter, South Africa's economy expanded minimally by 0.4%. However, manufacturing, transport, and construction drove this growth, this minimal growth. So let's look at transport. Um, are we hopeful that Prasa is going to get their act together and we're going to have the train services being very, very productive in the coming months, coming years? Because that will ease the burden on our roads, on the transport system, on affordability from getting from point A to point B. And we, as ordinary citizens of the country, that could ease and will ease our burden, will it not?
Well, it will definitely do that. If our transport systems are in order and sustainable, definitely things will go smoothly. The transport sector grew by 1 point. It wasn't one of the most contributing. Well, it contributed somewhat, but the largest contributors, as I said, were manufacturing and finance. However, transport also grew alongside all these other sectors except agriculture and electricity. What is important about the transport sector, and I think it's one fact that we cannot run away from, is that it doesn't only allow movement of people, passengers, and everything else.
Good.
It allows movements of goods. So it is a very important resource across the entire economy, because it has got potential and it actually links a lot of sectors or industries that are important for the economy. Hence, it is important for us to ensure that everything else goes well and we are able to sustain our transport infrastructure, and the systems should ultimately be in place for us to be able to move forward.
Okay, that's where we leave it, unless you have a final thought. I'm just kind of thinking perhaps you're going to say, please, good people, try and save as much as you can. But what are your
Exactly.
thoughts in closing?
Exactly. So what I think needs to happen is we need to be very cautious. We don't need to panic at all. We just need to take it one step at a time and see what works. Savings and more savings will definitely get us households elsewhere, definitely. And that's yeah, definitely my last word from that.
And work on a budget. Stick to your
Exactly.
budget, whatever you do.
Exactly.
Bokang Vumbukani Lepolesa, Chief Director responsible for National Accounts and Statistics South Africa. Lovely talking with you this morning. Thank you indeed. Go well and God bless.
Thank you, Julie.
It's exactly 8:29 news and views on Salam Media, and inshallah, in a minute or two, we are going to be looking at the issue regarding the Middle East, strengthening ties with China, and what exactly is the United States feeling about this new development in this relationship between the two countries.